It's it's not looking good.
It's not looking good for us. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Across the Pod. I am your host, JRich, and I'm here with my co-host, Tom, who got himself into a little predicament, but we will get into that off the top and let you all know about our tactics for Game Week 4, Tom's choices for wildcards, and the players we are looking at for defenders, midfielders, and forwards heading into this next game week. International break is over. Tom, you are in some hot water, but let's get into it right now.
But I came back. I was like, I'm going to check FPL Twitter. I'm going to see. I'm on my wildcard, so I was like, I want some final tips. I want to check nothing's gone on. See FPL. I see this tweet here, and I was like, damn, this. I remembered FPL Focal said he'd get a tattoo at 200k subs, which I guess in retrospect seems like I've undersold myself a little bit at only 100 subs. But I kind of came in and said, I was kind of tired after surfing, lay down, like, yeah, you know what? If we get 100 subs, our channel's in the infancy. Why not? Screw it. Let's go for it. Didn't think he'd actually reply or anyone would get any sort of traction. I've seen different people tweeting it now. I'm seeing our sub count as we're talking going up. I think we're already past 20, which is pretty scary. But yeah, I mean, Focal was really nice about it. And I kind of said, look, from now on, even if it does happen, our YouTube channel is going to be sponsored by FPL Focal every single episode.
Hell yeah.
So, a bit of investment. We'll see what happens. But I don't think we'll be able. Everyone's saying, "Oh, you should have said 1,000." I don't even think we'll get to 100. I think we're already slowing down.
Really? Wow. So what you're doing actually is you're challenging Focal to double down and post it again to get us even more subs to make sure we get to 100.
Well, I think there's a bit of a loophole here, JRich, because I didn't say which one of us would get the tattoo.
Well,
and I think whichever one of us scores the lowest points this season. It might have to do it, but no, I did put my, I put my name on the line, and I'm a man of my word. So I'm looking forward to this FPL Focal tattoo. I think my girlfriend's going to absolutely hate me for doing it, but let's see. Maybe I'll get one of her at the same time to try and even it out.
There you go. The life of a content creator. Got to do whatever it takes to make it, right? Well, not anything.
Exactly. So, but yeah, there you go. In this episode today, what do you want to talk about, JRich? Well, what are we covering? What are the main things? I've got a few things on my side, which I feel like I need to interrogate you. I've got a few questions which are going to be lined up for you, but otherwise, any plans?
So this is, I mean, we kind of walked in talking week 4 preview. I did want to ask you about your wild card because, your starting team not so hot. You're already ready to use your wild card. And so I did want to ask you what your selections were as far as that goes. But FPL Focal took over the show. We were just going to talk a little bit of things about whatever. And now we have a completely different show in mind with this new endeavor of our chance to hit 100 subs probably by the end of the day if everything goes well. But Tom, where do you want to start? Because this is your show now. It's your story with FPL Focal and wherever we're headed for Game Week 4.
Yeah, so I'm actually on Wildcard this week, so there is a few players which I'm trying to target, and I think what I'd be useful to hear your views on a couple of points, which I'm trying to just like tinker around the last little things. I think in general practice, what I'm looking at this week is to go for very low, kind of light at the back going forward. I think the only defender which I think premium people should be looking at is Trent, and I think he's only good for the next 2 fixtures. So I think for that Wolves away slot, I'm going to look to take out Trent at some point. I think the next 2, if he can haul at this point, he's been getting consistently clean sheets. Obviously, I think 3 in a row for Liverpool. But I think from this point onwards, if he's not going to get an assist, a goal, bonus points, I think I'm going to jump off the Trent train at Game Week 6. And I think I'm probably going to upgrade. I'm going without Saka this week and next week because I think Tottenham away and City away is tough fixtures. I still think Saka could do well, but personally, I kind of want to bring him back in for that Leicester home game. So I think what I'm going to go with is do Trent for 2 game weeks and then probably switch him out and bring Saka in for Game Week 6 onwards. So that's kind of like where I'm at. The thing that I'm tinkering around the most is, and I think it's a question a lot of FPL Twitter is, who is the best 4.5 million defender to bring in at the minute? And I'm seeing a lot of backwards and forwards over different people. So you've got kind of the Aston Villa route, Pau Torres and Konsa, which Personally, I'm not a big fan of the Aston Villa fixtures. Well, I think the fixtures are good, but I think there's going to be some rotation. They're in the Champions League. I just know, being a Newcastle fan, what happened last season with us in the Champions League, and we had a couple injuries, and our defense kind of dropped off, and we just weren't playing as well because we're absolutely knackered in midweek. So for me, I think Pau Torres is probably the best one. I think stay away from Lucas Dean, given Maatsen will probably play either one way or another in the Premier League. The other ones I'm kind of thinking about is Lewis Dunk, because I like the next two for Brighton.
The next two
Rico Lewis, if he's not going to be part of Pep Roulette for Man City. And then obviously there's Robinson, who we've got on our team at the minute, and a couple others. So maybe want to pass over to you on what you think, who's the best 4.5 million defender that's going to kind of get you all round, threat.
I mean, Lewis is definitely a guy that I'm all in on. We talked about it last week, and the guy that we actually went and got to make sure that we spent the 4 points to get Lewis in the team. I made the same swap, Rico Lewis for Lewis Hall, because Lewis Hall is probably going to go down in price. If you're talking about 4.5, I still, we talked about this as well. I think signing Miguelenko at 4.4 is actually worth it when you look at the fixtures beyond this Villa fixture. They're really good. And while Everton has been awful, it's like, if they could just be decent, he's probably pretty good value at 4.4. A lot of people have transferred him out. They're off him right now. And I think there is a lot of untapped potential potentially for him. But outside of that, I already have Robinson. We talked about Lewis. Like, those are my main two. I just like Miguelenko because of the value. But outside of that, like, Konsa is really the only one that we talked about as the fixtures are pretty solid. The team has a better run and should be playing much better overall, just because they had a bit of a tough stretch early and they honestly didn't play overly well. But I think you brought this up. The biggest issue with these 4.5s is that not all of them are playing heavy minutes, and Konsa is one of the few. So he'd be another one I would be looking at 4.5 because he has a good run of fixtures. You don't have to worry about him for a few weeks. But outside of that, I think this is where picking a guy, like even with Dunk, I don't mind Dunk at all for the 2 weeks, but after that, you don't want him on the team. And it's where I struggle with situations like this, and I lean on you a little bit, because for me, if I'm going to bring in a player for 2 weeks, they have to be someone who has a lot of upside. I don't know if Lewis Dunk has a ton of upside. You talk about, you're basically looking at a max 6 points if they get the clean sheet. And to be honest, even against Ipswich and Forest, I don't know if Brighton's going to get a clean sheet in those games. He's going to play, absolutely. And maybe there's some small potential for points outside of that. But I don't know if for 2 games that is worth it at the price. But let me know your thoughts, because you brought up Keane as well as a guy that you maybe would take on playing every game. Again, another Everton defender. While they're not very good, they do have a massive run of fixtures that is very favorable. Are those kind of the players you're looking at right now? Again, you do save a bit of money with Keane because he's only 4 mil.
Yeah, I think it's a good point on Mikolenko. I think he's a lot more nailed than Michael Keane. I think Keane is a good 4.0 option if we know Branthwaite is going to be out for a while. I know he's had a groin surgery over summer, and like Man United had interest in him. Everton, I think, in one of the early press conferences said he would be back towards the start of the season, but I've not seen any information on Branthwaite at all. And I saw a couple of other tweets saying that he's out kind of till end of September. So that would kind of give Michael Keane, if you want him for those first few fixtures, it's not a bad 4.0 option to have, then, and then you can kind of sort him out down the line. I do think Mikolenko, though, is a really good 4.4, nailed for the season. I do think Sean Dyche will probably turn it around at Everton. He tends to, historically with Burnley as well, is play very tight at the back, not concede much, not do much going forward. So I think Mikolenko is not a bad option if you believe that Everton are going to turn it around, because the way they're playing at the minute, for me, I've kind of just avoided them completely. So I think that's kind of where my head's at. The reason that I really like Lewis Dunk is because when I've had him in previous seasons, he also has quite good goal threat. So even in a game where, against Ipswich and against Nottingham Forest, if you think they're still going to concede, I can still see Brighton getting a lot of corners, a lot of set pieces, putting it in the box. Lewis Dunk does have a lot of goal threat, so I think there's potential for him to score points outside of just keeping a clean sheet. And obviously, I guess it depends on how you want to play the game. And I know you say, is there enough value in bringing him for the 2 weeks? But I would kind of argue that if you look there, it's kind of 4 and 5. I really like him. I wouldn't hate playing against Spurs at home, and then 9 Wolves at home, and then from 12 onwards is kind of good again. So it's kind of like if I can get someone that will rotate with Lewis Dunk, so like a 4.0 defender, maybe like Bednarek or Greaves, I think as long as there's someone who can fill those gaps nicely, then great. And if not, then I'll just use one of my free transfers to take him out when we have more data available and the fixtures swing a couple of game weeks down the line, is then at that point be able to make a switch to say, okay, Dunk's got Chelsea away. Let's just bring in someone who has a good game week fixture then, for instance, and we have more data and more knowledge about kind of what's going on. I think the other questions I have is like, who is the best 4.0 defenders? And I mentioned Bednarek for Southampton. I think they have pretty good fixtures. I was even looking at Ramsdale on Wildcard to kind of save that. He's 4.4. So it's like to save 0.1 here and there and try and catch price rises, that kind of thing. I think that's the real value in using a Wildcard, is making sure you do that. But what I realized is I'm probably going to go with Flecken in goal. I think his long-term ability, I hate the next 2 game weeks.
It's just the 2 games, right?
From then on, it's kind of like set and forget. I don't have to worry about my keeper. And instead of doing Ramsdale and probably a Collins at 4.5, which is a total of 9 million, I can just get Flecken for 4.5, covers Brentford's defence for those good game weeks. And then I'm probably going to pick Bednarek as a 4.0 defender, because I think some of Southampton's fixtures are actually pretty good. They've got Ipswich at home, Bournemouth away, Leicester at home, Everton at home. Well, there's some good fixtures in there where if I just want to rotate, like there's some fixtures Rico Lewis has where it's like Arsenal or whatever, or Lewis Dunk is a bit rubbish or elsewhere. I feel like I actually want some 4.0 defenders that, one, are 100% going to play. So maybe like Bednarek and Greaves are like for Ipswich. And ones which I don't actually mind playing if they've got a really good fixture. And I think what will that will allow me to do is unlock the funds for going forward. Because I want the big hitters in Salah, I want Haaland, I want Palmer, etc. So I think by going light at the back, especially in the substitute spots, I think with the information we've had for the last 3 game weeks, we kind of got a good idea of who's going to play. So I think for me, I still want 2 4.0 defenders. I'm not going to make the mistake and go for like Barco and otherwise that we did at the start of the season when everyone. But that's the thing, the beauty of having the information is kind of those are the 2 that I really, really like. I do like Michael Keane. If I can get some information on Branthwaite to say like he's not going to be in, then I'd probably bring Keane in over Greaves. And I'd probably go with Bednarek and Greaves as my 2 4.0 defenders. I'm probably going to have Rico Lewis, Lewis Dunk, and Trent as the back 3. So I think like 2 4.5 like definitely going to play. I love Lewis Dunk's fixtures. I love Rico Lewis if he's going to play. And I like Lewis Dunk as well. So I think my defense I'm kind of there or thereabouts with. There's kind of like the question I asked you about 4.5, but I feel a little bit better. I do think Mykolenko is not a bad shout. But otherwise it's kind of, I'm thinking, and the reason that I want Trent and Salah for the next 2 game weeks is just how good they've looked, but also just the 2 fixtures that are coming up. I think they're absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it here. They got Nottingham, they got Bournemouth, they got Wolves, and even Palace and Chelsea. Like those are not bad fixtures if you want to keep them that long. But we've heard a lot about the wild card to take out those Liverpool assets after game week 6 because it does get a lot tougher for them, and that's a good time when you can do that. This team hasn't used the wild card yet, obviously, or Barco would not be in the lineup. But I do think it's interesting because Lewis is a player that, we went back and forth on quite a bit because it seems like the potential's there. He's playing center mid when he's attacking. He's obviously playing right back when he's defending. And basically the past 3 games that he's played, there's always been opportunities for him to get an assist. And even against Ipswich, he definitely should have scored. Like you see his 0.5 expected goals. He was literally probably 10 yards away and booted it over the net, got a little overexcited. But the thing with City is like, even though he may not always play, the biggest thing for them with me is that if they're going to play, they have a chance at a clean sheet. Almost every single week, no matter what, they are some of the top odds to get a clean sheet, almost regardless of who they are playing. Now, when they play Arsenal, it's going to be a little bit different. But for the most part, even some of these neutral games, I think there's a world where, one, he can get a goal or an assist, probably more of an assist, but then there is still potential for the clean sheet. So when you talk about a player like Trent, obviously that's why he's in the lineup. Massive goal potential, massive assist potential, and the clean sheets, which they've done every single game so far this season. So it's almost like getting a discount Trent. I don't want to call him Trent because he's obviously not that stapled in the club for City, but it just seems like he is a guy who continues to plays every minute, and with a couple of injuries piling up for City and just some of these guys not fully healthy on international duty, whatever, Lewis is a guy that just for the price for a defender, he's basically a midfielder who is priced as a defender, and that's one of the reasons why he seems like he's just going to break FPL this year if he plays the entire season. That's
the point, right? It's like all the pro list is off the charts. Yeah. You've got like a Man City midfielder playing in defense, clean sheet potential, goals and assists, but it's just whether he plays. I personally think Walker will be given the nod in the Champions League fixtures. So I do think that Lewis will continue to play in the Prem. The one thing which worries me is Lewis for a pick, and I'm still going to go with him, is there's a lot of reliance on this Brentford at home game, because after this, City's fixtures are a little bit tougher. And then you kind of need him to be doing the assists and etc. I guess beyond, it's kind of like Arsenal at home, Newcastle away.
There's a couple of tough ones.
It kind of get good again. Yeah, so maybe I'm just overthinking it with Lewis. I think it's just like if he plays, get him in. The one other good thing which Pep does, even if he kind of messes you over by not starting Rico Lewis, is he tends to avoid subs unless they're needed. So if he, for instance, we were playing Rico Lewis in our starting 11, he doesn't actually sub him. He doesn't start, but Pep doesn't sub him on. At that point, it's kind of like we've got another playing defender that will come on for them. Exactly. So I don't feel it's kind of covered in that aspect. So I feel a little bit better about that. One of the other questions that I had on Wildcard is around my last midfield slot. And I've got the budget for either Matoma or Eze. I think so many people are loving Eze this year, but I just don't think Crystal Palace are clicking. I think Brighton are clicking more so. Going to score, like, you can see Brighton scoring 4 against Ipswich, I think. Absolutely. Of which, Matoma, I think Minter, João Pedro, Welbeck are all decent picks, and you can see them each getting like some sort of return. So I like all of them. The thing is with Eze, like if you look at the first 3 game weeks, he blanked twice and then obviously got a goal against Chelsea. Yeah. And I just don't think Crystal Palace are playing the fluid football that they played with. I think obviously Elise is a big miss for them. I think the system isn't working as well with Mateta coming back and having like mixed minutes. I know everything runs through Eze. He is the main point for penalties, free kicks. He kind of like the main focal point. There's a shout out to FPL Focal again. But he kind of is the thing that everything runs through for Palace. So I think he is their talisman and a great option. I'm just thinking like, for me, Leicester at home, then Man United at home, still 2 great fixtures versus Matoma's Ipswich at home, Forest at home. Who do I think is going to score more points? And that's kind of like the question which I'd like to throw over to you to see if you landed in the same place as me.
Yeah, so like I think the way that I play right now and the way I've been kind of building my team is to try and do my best to find defenders who are going to be staples in the club, hopefully for as long as I need them or until I wildcard. Yep. You talk about Rico Lewis and why we like him so much. The reason why I like him is like you basically have until February till he gets a really bad run of fixtures. There's a couple bad ones here or there. We talked about the stretch where he has Arsenal, Newcastle, but outside of that, there's not too many really bad games where you're worried that he's not going to play or potentially he could blow up and have a really poor performance. And so I basically have him for as long as I need him. Trent's kind of the same way. He's a little bit more difficult, higher price. But then the reason why I bring this up is because I don't mind taking a chance on a player like Matoma, knowing he only has a 2-run stretch, because I'm going to build my team in a way that I can make that switch more easily. When it comes to defenders, I don't want to be kind of playing the short-term game with defenders as much. I want to do that more with my attackers because that's going to maximize my points and ultimately have a higher output for my FPL team. So for me, whether you want to go Eze or Matoma, it's difficult because I feel like Eze is more of the longer term play. Matoma is more of the short term play. I'm fine with either one. We talked about it last week. We put Matoma in the club because we think he's going to have a phenomenal game. I would probably lean him based off how I play right now in my strategy because I want to maximize the weeks that he's in the team. And if I got to switch him out later, no problem. Because when we talked about this initially, it was talking about trying to bring in Salah into the club. I brought in Salah and Matoma, and I'm going to probably take them both out after week 6 because I'm going to take the salary and then reallocate it other places. But even for you, Eze is still great, and I love him. but you do save a little bit of money, and potentially I think there's a higher chance for a price rise for Matoma heading into next week. But I am surprised, though. I expect him to go up a little bit more than he has. There's not as much steam, but if he has a big game this week, he definitely could, because it seems like they're running a lot down that left side, and I think he's going to be a big part of what they do. And like you talked about, they could score 4 on Ipswich, and no one would be surprised because of how fast they play, and Matoma would be a massive part of that. So he's where I would lean a bit because of the savings, and I think the team is playing at a just playing much better in general. So I would probably leave Matoma a little bit, but I do think Eze is a phenomenal guy as well, because you look at what he does for that team, all you need is a penalty, and he's probably going to be just fine. But the fixtures are a little bit tougher. Right. They are a little bit tougher.
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of price ranges which I think are going to be updated tonight. So I think Matoma will increase in price tonight, and that kind of leans me towards thinking that if I get him at 6.6 before he gets 6.7, and then he has a good game against Ipswich or Forest, people are going to bring him in. He's going to go up to 6.8, and then I can, when I want to jump off him, I've got an extra 0.1, which will help me elsewhere in my team. And I think value is so important this year, and it's part of the reason why I brought in Mbeumo in this week, because I think he's got 2 horrible fixtures. Well, I think City fixtures pretty bad. I think City have a 52% chance of getting a clean sheet. I think I owned Mbeumo last year against City when he did score. So I don't hate him against City. I do like him against Ange's high line against Spurs. So I think from game week 5 onwards, I like it. It was just a case of, do you get ahead of the curve and bring in a player who you think suboptimal for the game week, which seems so silly on Wildcard to bring someone in who I don't think is actually going to score. But I just think getting ahead of the price change this year is so important. So I've kind of brought him in. I do think there is an option where I could use just bring in Eze and Matoma and leave Mbeumo out, and then game week 6 find a way to bring him in. But I like being ahead of the curve and setting myself up. Even though I get wildcard in game week 4, I think it's, if your team is set up in a way which is kind of, you can either get to or already is at a point where the people who are wildcard in game week 6 and onwards, if your team already looks like their team or you can get to that, then why would you not do it earlier and get ahead of the points? That's kind of where my head's at with it.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. You know, we talked about this one a lot, and it was one I was more hesitant about because of the fixtures. And to be honest, I thought I got a little bit lucky against Southampton. It was more so the defense that screwed up than him necessarily making the play, especially on that second goal. But he is going to make a lot of good things. You see what he does already. The 0.81 expected goals. I mean, he was basically wide open on both of his goals. So that's kind of is what it is. Probably not going to happen against City, but it always could. Yep. I think that's the big thing. You talk about the Tottenham fixture. It reminds me of us watching the game against Newcastle, right? They're going to sit back, they're going to counter, and that ultimately is how Newcastle ended up scoring, was because of the counterattack. And if Brentford's going to play the same way, you can see a scenario where he does score in that game in what appears to be a bad matchup, which is only going to increase his price down the line with a massive good run of fixtures. Now, I did want to ask you about your attackers, because we did stick with Isak, even though he's probably not going to go down with the Wolves fixture, but we did see Gordon already see a price decrease, and Haaland went up to 15.2. Did you take Haaland and Isak once again for your wild card, or did you go somewhere else with your forwards?
The thing is I'm obviously a Newcastle fan, so I know what Isaac's capable of, and I think he will continue to have a great season. I think he'll score a lot of goals. I even saw an interview with the Swedish team after he scored, saying that a lot of people are taking him out in the FPL, and he prefers it when people take him out so he can punish them, which I think he will do. And I guess there's 2 things I want to talk about here. One is my team, I've gone without Isaac. I just think the value elsewhere with the way Newcastle are playing, like we've got 7 points from 3 games, which we should really not have 7 points from the way we played. And I think until things start ticking for Newcastle and the fixtures become really good, then I'd start looking at Gordon and Isaac again. The other thing is, I think what's always useful to see is kind of like, what is the template FPL Twitter or elsewhere looking at doing? And I think the main transfers that I'm seeing is Saka and Isaac transferred to Salah and João Pedro. Now, I think one thing to really consider is, if you're making those moves, is just, are you doing it to try and stay in the curve of what everyone else is doing? Because for me, I think this week, Saka and Isaac outscore Salah and João Pedro. I have Salah and João Pedro in my wildcard team, but I can see a scenario where Isaac scores against Wolves, Saka has a goal and assist against Tottenham, and João Pedro has just come back from international duty, only comes on for 30 minutes. and Salah maybe just gets one of the returns in amongst, Jota or Luis Diaz, or even, who else is playing Szoboszlai in the 10 for Liverpool. So for me, I don't think it's necessary. And I'm seeing people take a -4 hit for that. And I just think that I understand trying not to be left behind, but you picked Isaac and Saka for a reason when you picked this team at the start. I think unless you're on Wildcard and want to take them out, for me, and that's kind of the reason we've left them in this team here, is I think we picked them based on data, based on eye test, everything else. I see a scenario where they do well this week, and then people are struggling to bring them back in. I know game week 6, a lot of people are then making the move Salah back to Saka, but then at that point you've already used 2 free transfers, which was basically for the gain of 2 games, which I don't really see the value in that much.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big debate for us, knowing that Saka was being heavily transferred out because of the fixtures. But after that, it's not so bad. But then you still have the scenario where you have another 3 bad fixtures with Liverpool, Newcastle, and Chelsea yet again. And then obviously it's like wide open for the rest of the season for them. After that, you can see it's basically green the whole way. But I think that's where it's so difficult. I look at Isak, and like you said, we know what he's capable of, and more importantly, I think this team can play a lot better than they've played. They have gotten a little bit lucky, no doubt about it. They won on the counterattack last game against Tottenham. Yep. They probably should have conceded 3 goals in that game. It was definitely should have been at least 2, if not 3, but Pope played well and they missed some big chances. But I think the bigger thing for me with this team, and the reason why I want to keep them, is that there has to be some element of calling your shot as well. Saka, I don't know if I'm all the way there, but I'm in on Isak. I think he's going to have another phenomenal stretch of games. I like that he's scoring goals and in good form for the Swedish team. I think he can bring that back to Newcastle, hopefully spark the team a little bit, show why he's the main man, why they need to get him the ball, and ultimately still be great. But I get it. If you want to take him out, take him out. But I think, especially against Wolves, he's probably going to make you pay, at which point you're still in a conflict as to whether you bring him back, because we know what he's capable of, but yet the fixtures aren't as good anymore. So I'm definitely with you. There's reason to bring in Pedro because of the price, but is there a world where maybe he's not really worth the value? I think there is potential for that, but you look at the fixtures, they're not so bad, especially for the price. Then you can afford to have him in the team. But is there anyone else you did want to touch on? Because I feel like we hit on the defense, we hit on the midfield, we hit on the forwards a little bit, and I most importantly wanted to know where your head was at with your wild card. This team is probably set. Don't think we're going to make any changes for the pod team, but is there anyone else you wanted to talk about?
I think the only thing that I'm trying to do, I've left my wildcard kind of up to the last second because I've been trying to catch double price rises, which hasn't gone so well so far. But if Luis Diaz increases again, I'm going to take the 0.2 value, sell him, and then bring in someone else. So I think that's kind of where my head's at. I think Luis Diaz is still a great option, but obviously he was away with Colombia. And I think Liverpool have Champions League on Tuesday next week. So I do see a scenario where slot rotates the Liverpool squad and you see Nunes or you see Gakpo playing instead of Diaz. Obviously, he's had like a more strenuous international break than others in the Liverpool squad. So I do see a scenario where he wants to keep Luis Diaz fit for Tuesday, or even he starts and brings him off at the 60-minute mark. And for that reason, I'm kind of like, I'd rather have Trent over Luis Diaz. That's the reason I've gone with Trent and Salah. I think they're the 2 Liverpool assets I want to own. I don't hate a Liverpool triple up either, but I just think longer term, that it's kind of like they're the 2 that I want. I also think when you mentioned about the Arsenal assets, a lot of people on Wildcard are bringing in Arsenal defenders.
Really?
So Gabriel, Saliba. I'm seeing people, and obviously Raya. I'm seeing a lot of people do this with the intention to either bench them and bring them in game week 6, or people who are doing game week 6 wildcards have double or even triple Arsenal in defence. So the thing is, which I don't quite understand there, is there's obviously 3 really good fixtures, which you probably expect Arsenal to keep 2 or 3 clean sheets there. But then you have like really 3 difficult fixtures, which I think Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, Chelsea away, I don't think they keep a single clean sheet. And then for the amount of value you've put into those assets for the clean sheet potential, I think that's just better spent elsewhere. So for me, I'm actually avoiding all Arsenal, which is a bit of a rogue choice, but I've chosen to go with, we know this year, and like similarly last year, year before, there's been hardly any clean sheets, or clean sheets numbers are reducing. I just see more value in getting the attackers. And I think it's a lesson learned from the first 3 game weeks, is trying to be too clever, going with like assets that, people haven't picked, or going with ones that you're like, oh, I like this player, I think he's going to do well. I'm just kind of over that a little bit, and I'm picking Man City's best player in Haaland. I'm picking Liverpool's best player in Salah. I'm going to have Arsenal's best player in Saka, have, Chelsea, Palmer. So it's just like, just pick the best players and let them play every week. I love Mbeumo because he's going to be on their pens.
Yeah.
He's going to play every week, first name on the team sheet, and it gives you less of a headache, which is part of the reason why I don't mind having Rico Lewis in as a punt, because the rest of my players I know are all going to play every week. So it's kind of where my head's at with the wild card. Still some TBC.
Yeah.
Still going to do some last minute tinkering. Obviously not ideal to use your wild card so early, but I feel really positive about just having a team on paper, which I'm way happier about. So I think it's worth it for me. But yeah, how are you feeling for game week 4?
I'm excited. I think it's my first taste, right, of the international break and then players coming back and seeing like, how is that going to impact my team? Because you kind of told me already, Luis Diaz is maybe not going to be available. And even with Champions League, and, we brought up his fixtures where he's getting subbed off. And I think Liverpool's been very fortunate. They haven't had to play all their players the entire game. They've been subbing guys off for whatever reason. Salah plays every minute of every game, even though he's probably the most likely to come off in some of these games, just to give him some time off. But I'm very excited for what we have with this team and then my own personal team. I think it's going to be a very good game week. Last week was a little okay. There was no clean sheets outside of the one, which was great for us because we've been kind of avoiding the clean sheets as much as possible. And the only team that did, once again, was Liverpool, who is 3 for 3 on the year. Can they make it 4 for 4, Tom? I think we're expecting that, but I think it's going to be a great week of fixtures after the international break, and I am very, very excited for it.
Me too. It's been lovely to be back. Isn't that quite nice? We popped out 2 videos in the space of a week, which is quite special, especially even though we're not across the pod. We're both on the Canadian side.
Yes,
but I'll be back in London for the next few, so I'll be looking forward to be back to across the pod. So appreciate JRich. Thank you so much for hosting us as always. Loved it. And yeah, we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Yeah, thank you to FPL Focal for the shout out. Thank you to everybody who is new and tuning in.
Big F, how do the F?
Shout out to them, man.
On my body.
Hopefully, yeah. Right now you're just making the sign, but it's going to be on your body probably shorter than you're hoping for. Should have set the bar much higher, but it makes for a great story, and we love it and we appreciate it. So thank you to FPL Focal for the shout out, even if it is at Tom's expense. But thank you so much for tuning in. If you are new and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We would really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys next week for Game Week 5. We're out.
Subscribe peace. As long as we're not. Stop at 99. But yeah, peace. Bye.
Shout out FPL Focal, man. They're sending in the subs, even if it's at your expense. I love it. I gotta respect it.
I literally just went out. So I'm on Vancouver Island. Literally went surfing. Came back. Thought I'd check FPL Twitter. Need some final tips for my wild card to see if anything's going on. So FPL Focal got a tattoo for 200k subs, which in retrospect seems a little bit silly that I've sold myself at 100 subs. But I said if we got to 100 subs, I'd also get a Focal tattoo. And I mean, to be fair, his content is fantastic. It's sleek. It's great. So I don't hate the idea of getting a tattoo for Focal. If it was going to be any FPL creator, it'd probably be him.